being a guide, being an international guide, is part of the oldest and the kind of the most long-running and most established mountaineering profession that there is in the mountains, and it's the oldest and highest level of qualification that there is as well. If you go back to the kind of the end of the 19th century, people like Whymper in his early ascent of the Matterhorn, that was a guided trip, and it would have been very much sort of de rigueur that people would have gone to a little alpine village, employed the expertise of local guides who knew the area very well to take them up into the mountains, and that was very much a part of the kind of the early mountaineering culture, if you like. I suppose that the notion of that as a profession really came of age in the 50s, and any of you that have been to the Mont Blanc Massif, well, I'm almost certain will have read the 100 Most Beautiful Routes in the Alps that was written by Gaston Rebofat, and these were French guides then who were living in the Chamonix Valley, making their living by taking people climbing and turning their true sort of passion for mountaineering into a profession, if you like. And certainly for me as a young kid, I managed to read this book, Starlight and Storm, or Étoile et Tempête as it was originally written in French, and it's a truly wonderful account that really sums up the passion for mountaineering that comes through the kind of the trade of going out into the mountains and sharing a really fantastic experience with your clients, where you've got the kind of the expertise and you know the routes perhaps, you've certainly got this kind of technical decision-making expertise, but the real joy comes from seeing that, you know, kind of imparted upon somebody who otherwise wouldn't be comfortable in that environment. And it's a lovely book. It's a great antidote to you know, all the books about sort of heroism in the mountains, because it's a wonderful story of camaraderie in the mountains and of a shared experience together. So what on earth is a British mountain guide? Well, you'll notice that we've got a little array of badges on, and if you come across to our stand over in the climbing village, you'll see the kind of the combination of British mountain guide badges and logos, and the International Guides badge and carnet. Now, a lot of the other sort of outdoor qualifications, if you're a ski instructor, for example, you might have some resistance working in French ski resorts. But the great thing for us is that all British mountain guides are like all mountain guides. We're all members of the International Federation of Mountain Guides Associations, the IFMGA. That means we all wear the same badge. Our license, once we graduate, comes from a little office in Châtel in Switzerland. So it's the same license that a Swiss guide or an Italian guide or a French guide would have. That's why we all kind of wear the same badge when we're working internationally. And because that's an international federation of associations, the British Association, the BMG, that's us. We're the folks that have gone through the British version of the scheme. Now, we should do this like a pub quiz, shouldn't we, and see how many of these people you can kind of guess the names of. Does anybody know who this is? A chap called Alan Fife, fantastically legendary Scottish mountaineer. He's a guide, happens to be the Secretary of Mountain Leader Training in Scotland now. These guys, you'll see them in the news all the time. You know, John Bracey and Matt Helliker, constantly putting up hard new routes all around the world in the greater ranges and in the Alps. John Cousins has been climbing all over the world for years and was famously the voice of the original Stone Monkey DVD. He's now the Secretary of Mountain Leader Training UK. Kenton Cool is a well-known kind of British mountain guide, happens to be famous for having climbed Everest. This is him on the summit on his 9th occasion of guiding that peak. Andy Cave, Twid Turner, Stu McAleese, Pat Littlejohn, Louise Thomas Turner. These are all kind of names that are synonymous with sort of hard British climbing. They're all members of the British Mountain Guides Association. So let's talk about the prerequisites. You've got to have done 50 at least multi-pitch rock climbs. For those of you, how many of you are climbers? Stick your hands up quickly. Okay, E1 and 5B and above. So kind of reasonably technical kind of grade, nothing too hard, pretty steady sort of level, but you need to have done 50 of those multi-pitch climbs in the mountains and on the sea cliffs and in adventurous places all around the UK. Okay, scribble them in your logbook. That's a start. You need to have done 50 winter climbs. Now, these really need to be kind of definitely grade 3 and above. The majority of them need to be grade 5 and above. You're going to be assessed later on at climbing grade 5, and some of those need to be ice climbs, and some of those need to be mixed climbs. But this is one of the stumbling blocks for a lot of the continentals. The majority of this has got to be in Scotland. So you can't just kind of up sticks to Chamonix and decide you're going to stay there for the rest of your career. For a lot of British guides, they have to come back to the Scottish winter process, make sure they've got enough Scottish winter climbs under their belt. And you learn a phenomenal amount by going through that sort of apprenticeship. You have to be able to ski, and by skiing off-piste, I mean properly off-piste, not just kind of ducking out under the ropes and off the side, but way out in the mountains where you're making all of your own decisions. You're making all your decisions about the avalanche terrain, the conditions of the snow, the ski techniques, the kit you're going to use, the routes you're going to take. But you also have to have linked that together. So you need to have done something in the order of 20 days linked hut-to-hut ski touring or self-sufficient ski touring. This is actually out on a ski expedition in British Columbia. It's a proper busman's holiday, this was four British mountain guides all going on a little trip together out to the Hamathko ice field and just skiing completely unexplored and previously unskied peaks. Now this is where it starts to get tricky. Okay? All of that was getting you up to the point that you're technically proficient to kind of go to the Alps. And out in the Alps, you need to have done at least 5 years of alpine mountaineering. You need to have 20 major summits under your belt. But this is the crunch kind of factor. You need 10 what they call Grand Cours. And these are big snow and ice routes. This is the northeast, or the north face of the Dwarfs. The northeast spur is this line up here, and the north face is up here. I've been lucky enough to climb 2 different routes on here, very contrasting. The northeast spur is one of the most beautiful rock climbs on the first day, and then a little night on a very, very comfortable ledge actually, and then a whole sort of second day of mixed climbing to the summit. Give you some sort of idea, it's about 1,200 meters from the bottom to the top, so we're getting on for a kind of, towards a mile of climbing on a route like that. Whereas over on this side of the face, if you climb a route like the Ginat, which runs up this side, it's just consistent, kind of, easy kind of Scottish grade 2, 3 sort of snow romping, and then the most wonderful pitches of grade 5 climbing for about 20 pitches straight up the right-hand side. Wonderful climb. They're very, very different sorts of routes, though. This is why you suddenly discover all that mileage that you got earlier on in your apprenticeship is going to pay off. At this point, you're on the northeast spur. You're climbing probably in rock boots, nice big comfy ones, because it's not that hard. I suppose the climbing's probably around hard VS, something like that. But in your bag, you've got all of your overnight kit. So you've got a little sleeping bag and a little mat that you can sit on, a little stove to share between you. You've got your big boots, because the next day you're going to be mixed climbing, and you've got a couple of technical ice axes and all of the kind of ice climbing apparel and equipment for the following day. So pretty kind of heavy bag. And this is where Brits are classic at this. Looking at an alpine guide and sort of guidebook and sort of going, oh, well, it's only VS, I can climb VS. Whereas the real crux is whether you can climb 20 pitches of VS in a hurry with a camping bag on your back, basically. That's the kind of the crux of it. So the routes are long. You need to be starting off from the huts, getting out of the hut door at midnight. Typically on a route like the Ginat, I think we had 16 hours of climbing. So sort of flat out. Something like the Grand Jurasse, if you go and climb the Walker Spur, I think we left the Le Chaux hut at midnight, got to the summit of the mountain at 8 o'clock in the evening. So that's 20 hours of climbing, some 50 pitches of climbing between the middle of the night and 8 o'clock the following evening, when you finally kind of lie down and have a break. Now, the importance in terms of the high level of prerequisites is that doing routes like this forces you to spend time out in the mountains. And on one hand, it's a curse. On the other hand, it's a blessing, because spending a night on a kind of an airy little crow's nest like this is one of the most wonderful things that you ever get to do in the mountains. These beautiful bivouacs where you've been utterly exhausted after a hard day of climbing, and you finally get to sit down or lie down, ideally somewhere so safe like this, stuck out on a little perch. You can take your helmet off, you can sit back and relax and just watch that wonderful kind of carpet of stars come out as at last, after the nerves and the frantic energy of the day, you get to kind of kick back and get a stove on. And then, of course, when you've done all of that, the scheme begins. You're allowed on. You can put your application in and you can start going through the training and assessment process. So this is the class of 2011. They're all kind of tooled up in their squeaky clean Arc'teryx waterproofs, because we're sponsored by Arc'teryx, and they're ready to go through the training and assessment scheme. And they've got about 3 years of training and assessment courses in front of them. It looks like a bit of a dry, drab list, that, but I'll quickly rattle through it. As effectively, you get assessed at your ability to look after people in the UK on rock climbs. So that's teaching climbing, taking people climbing, rescuing people off climbs if things go wrong, and proving that you can climb at the required grade. There's a whole section on coaching and teaching and training and assessing in there as well. So they're kind of comparable with the British mountain instructor schemes. You then go up to Scotland, you get stuck into getting assessed on kind of grade 5 mixed ground and ice climbing, and looking after clients and teaching winter climbing and avalanche and all that kind of things. There's then an alpine avalanche course. Can you go off-piste completely self-sufficiently and make sensible decisions about the snow conditions when you're looking after your clients? And then you get stuck into the kind of, the cream of the whole thing. This is what you came for, the Alpine Summer, where there's a training course, of course, and then there's a sort of 2 summers really of being an aspirant guide, where you get to work with more experienced guides all over the Alps and gain the experience that you need to be independent and self-sufficient. Then finally, there's a ski test. And years ago, it used to be sort of okay to sneak in as a British guide if you weren't a great skier, but it's a totally equivalent scheme now. So British guides have to be, trained and assessed at exactly the same level as French and Swiss guides to get this international badge that we've talked about. And then finally, you pop out the end of it and the life of a guide is yours. And it is just the most wonderful career you could possibly choose for. We're basically qualified to be able to autonomously go wherever we want to go in the world and take our clients on expeditions to alpine peaks in any of the alpine countries, and people do a huge variety of things. I was thinking about trying to put a day in the life of a guide in this presentation, and it suddenly struck me that actually there's so much variety, so diverse, that it's impossible to generalize in terms of what a guide actually does, because they do so many different things with their qualification.